and welcome to Thursday morning Torah study. We're learning about Kosher Crash Course today, and we're learning about some off-the-beaten-track stuff, which is the laws of dangerous foods. If we have time today, we'll also go into a very, very interesting area of kosher law, probably the most important area of kosher law, which we'll hopefully be getting into today, and that is the laws of insects. Anybody got any ideas on what the Torah says about eating insects? In our live studio audience here? What do you think? Which insects are kosher? Any insects kosher? Well, apparently there are certain brands of grasshoppers that are kosher, none of which, thankfully, we are aware of. So we don't eat any grasshoppers, but as a general rule, it is more treif to eat an insect than it is to eat a pig. In other words, if you've got a little tiny aphid in your strawberry, that is 5 biblical prohibitions versus the 1 biblical prohibition, which is eating bacon. Okay, a lot worse to eat a strawberry than it is to eat a pig. So we'll be hopefully learning about that in a few minutes. But continuing to what we learned last week in our Kosher Crash Course. Last week we learned about the laws of dangerous foods, and they were the beginning part of this session. We learned about the prohibition of mixing fish and dairy, fish and milk, not meat and milk. Fish and milk. That was what we spoke about last week. And by the way, you can find all of our previous classes. We're trying to sequence them nicely, but you can see all of our previous classes on YouTube at youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. That's youtube.com/Jewish Gardens for all of our previous classes. But today, in continuation of that interesting theme, we're carrying on with 5 or 6 different kinds of foods, different other kinds of foods that are actually dangerous for you. And that's why the Torah says that you're not allowed to eat them. Let's find out what they are. The first one is one that we've actually touched upon in a previous part of this course. It is about eggs. Eggs that have been left peeled overnight, as well as garlic and onions that are peeled overnight. Warren, would you eat a peeled garlic that was left peeled overnight? No sweat, right? It's not like a big deal. Right? You would have thought that it's not a big deal. Let's take a look at what the Torah says about this interesting law. Now, again, I don't know what's going on Facebook and YouTube. I see Elaine is commenting, which is great, on the actual YouTube site, which is great. This is how it used to be in the olden days. Good. But on Facebook, I don't see any comments, maybe because, there it is. Okay, they moved us to the bottom again. I see Dean is with us. Good morning. As well as Terry from Atlanta and Marty from Mirasol. Wonderful. Live in the studio audience, we have Steve and Warren and Keith and Neil and Ed, which is great stuff as we're slowly getting back to our strength. Almost 20 people in shul this morning. Amazing outdoors in our beautiful pavilion. And we're learning Torah study indoors right now on the giant screen for anybody that wants to join us in person for Torah study. Marty says Facebook is working, live is working, YouTube is working. It's all good stuff. Fantastic. Let's do this. So when it comes to eggs, garlic, or onions, which have been shelled, like peeled, right? Can you say shelled garlic? Can you say shelled onions? No, not really. It doesn't have a shell. A peeled onion, a shelled garlic, or a shelled egg. Peeled. Let's call the one word. We're going to use the word peeled, right? If it was peeled and remained like that overnight, then even if they were closed up in a bag and they were placed in the refrigerator, you're not allowed to eat them. Why? Because of an evil spirit that rests upon them. So I told you, it's a little off the beaten track here today. You go for it, Keith. I know you're bursting with a question here.
So I make a half dozen hard-boiled eggs, and I peel them, and I leave them in my fridge so I can eat them during the week. That's not kosher.
Technically, I'm going to repeat the question. Keith is asking for the people on virtual. The question was posed by Keith: what happens if he cooks a dozen eggs to eat all week long, and he hard-boiled eggs, obviously, and he wants to store them in the fridge so you can have them every day instead of having to cook them every day? So what do you do? Well, there's a few solutions. The answer is no. You can't eat them the way they are, but you could leave them in the shell. You don't have to peel them. Another solution is that you could put some salt in them. Just sprinkle a tiny bit of salt and you're good. The bad spirit doesn't come within salt. Aha. See? You learned something, right? Interesting. Now, this is a little bit weird, guys. It's a little out there. This is not like hard and fast law. This is more spiritual stuff. Let me give you a quick example about what I'm talking about over here. that in the morning, when you wake up in the morning, there's an evil spirit upon your hands. Did you know that? Did you know that? There's an evil spirit upon your hands. Let me explain to you what this means. The evil spirit, there's no such thing as evil, as Warren and I have often... Okay, so Warren and I have an ongoing debate, and Warren, you're entitled to your opinion, even if you're wrong, right? So,
You're entitled to your opinion, even though I don't quite understand it.
Okay, we're making progress. We're making progress. You're saying you don't understand it. That's great. And by the way, Warren, I have to tell you, I didn't understand it either. I didn't understand it either. Now, this is a very off-topic idea. I just want to mention it out of respect to our senior sage, to Warren, because Warren is going through a very difficult period in his life right now. And the Torah tells us that there's no such thing as evil. So I can't explain to you how the horrible things that happen to us are actually good. In other words, I can't explain it to you. I can't feel it, is what I'm saying. I can't empathize with how bad things are good. My heart doesn't agree with what I'm saying. My mind does. Okay. But anyways, I don't want to confuse. We're on a kosher crash course of here. We'll keep crashing here on the kosher here. The idea is like this: evil is the absence of good. Like darkness doesn't exist. That's a good analogy, by the way, for you, Warren. There's no such thing as darkness. Darkness is where there is no light, right? But you can't make darkness. To make darkness, you remove the light. Where there's light, there's automatically no darkness, right? I think it's just interesting meditation to think about there, right? So when it comes to evil as well, evil is the absence of good, just like darkness is the absence of light. When we are awake and conscious, our soul fills up our body. But when we sleep, our soul leaves our body, which is why we're semi-conscious or not conscious. The Talmud says that sleep is 1/60th of death. 1/60th of death. And that's why we prepare for sleep like we prepare for death. You're supposed to recite a special confessional prayer every night before you go to sleep. You'll find it in the prayer book on page 141 in this prayer book. It's the prayer before retiring at night. And you're supposed to say, it's like a confession, Master of the universe, I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or vexed me or sinned against me. You do forgiveness and atonement. It's all sorts of good stuff. We prepare for sleep like we prepare for death. And in the morning when we wake up, we actually make a special, what else? Now, what happens in the morning? When your soul has left you all night long, what has been there when your soul is not there? A spirit of impurity enters. When the holy soul leaves your body, that's when the spirit of impurity enters your body. Now, what happens the moment that you wake up? The godly soul comes back into your body. And what happens to the darkness that was in there? It goes running for the hills, right? The impure energy leaves. It leaves the body as soon as the godly soul comes in, but it leaves through the fingernails. It leaves through the fingernails. And that's why we're supposed to wash our hands in the morning. You're supposed to wash 6 times alternating with a cup. You take a cup and you go once on the right, once on the left, again on the right, again on the left, and a third time on the right, a third time on the left. First thing you're supposed to do in the morning. And this washing is called the Negel Vasser. Negel Vasser. Vasser means water. Negel in Yiddish means nails. Nails. Nail water. Water of the nails. Because, again, without getting too Kabbalistic right now, the impure energy leaves through the hands, through the fingernails, and therefore by washing our hands, we cleanse our fingernails from any negative energy. None of us want negative energy in our lives, right? You don't want negative energy in your relationship, in your spouse, in your children, in your business, in your politics. You want none of that. And we try to divest of any negative energy that could possibly be going on. Good morning, Rob Berger, that's with us also on Facebook. And Winston. All right, good. So,
You have to etch the Shema.
of course, the Shema is part of the prayer that you recite at night, because the Shema is the same thing that you do before you die. You're supposed to say the Shema, right? Okay. So let's go back to our eggs, okay? Now that we know, we don't understand it. We don't understand this. But we know the Torah tells us that there is a spirit of impurity that rests on peeled eggs, garlic, and onions that have remained so overnight. And this, by the way, is from the Code of Jewish Law. It's inside the laws of protecting your body and soul. Now, if you have not removed their external shell, and part of If you haven't removed all of the external shell, but parts of the external shell remain during the night, then you're allowed to eat them the next day without any concern. Also, if with regards to the onion, if there's some hair and there's some like some stems on the end of it, right, in the bottom part of the onion, if there's still some hair on it, right, or same thing applies to the garlic, then it's okay overnight. So an egg which wasn't completely peeled, or an onion and a garlic that wasn't completely made bold, right, but it's got some hair still on it, whatever, what do you call that stuff, stem or whatever, some growth coming out of it, then it's fine. Now, when it comes to the egg, the garlic or the onion, which were mixed up into a salad, so what happens? You made a salad and you put it in the fridge and it's got garlic and onion inside, right? Does that mean the whole salad is not good for tomorrow? Right? If you put even a little bit of salt or oil on it, then it's no problem if it passed the night, because by putting the salt or the oil, you've changed it up somewhat, and therefore the evil spirit doesn't rest upon it.
I think the stem of the garlic is called the root.
The root. There you go. Thank you, Warren. The root of the garlic. The sprout. Makes sense. Very good. Okay. So basically, again, this is something which is a little bit beyond our ability to fathom or comprehend. It's kind of like talking about electricity, right? When we talk about electricity, we say, okay, we don't understand how it works, but we know that if you touch this wire to that wire, you're going to get hurt, right? So we kind of relate to this stuff like we relate to electricity. The Torah tells us this, okay, we'll take it as a given, and we'll leave it at that. In other words, we're not going to say, I don't believe in what I don't understand, because you don't understand the human digestive system also, and you still eat breakfast, right? Right? So let's not kid ourselves by saying that if I don't understand this, then it's nonsense. Not really true, right? It's not actually that way, right? What about powdered eggs, like egg powder, right? Egg powder, or garlic powder, or onion powder. You're allowed to use them without a problem, because having ground them up into a powder, they've been changed sufficiently to repel the evil spirit. So there's obviously something going on over here with an evil spirit with regards to sharp foods, right? Onions and garlic, as well as eggs. Thankfully, we don't have this prohibition regarding jalapenos. Well, I guess you can't peel jalapeno or a chili, but those foods seem to have something special about them. There's something special about them. Could it be related to the fact that the egg is the source of life, right? We know that a woman's egg is related to impurity. When a woman menstruates, what is she doing? She's divesting of what was potential human life. She's releasing an egg, right? So she then becomes spiritually impure, no longer allowed to be with her husband for the next 12 days until she goes to the mikveh. So you see there's an egg associated with impurity there, right? Could it be the same thing applies to the chicken egg? Same thing with the garlic and the onion. They are foods that tend to have much more power than other foods. You know, we've learned this in the concept of kosher before in previous classes, that when you when you have a dormant taste of non-kosher food inside the walls of a pot, for example, it's been more than 24 hours, the taste is embedded, is dormant. When you cook an onion there, the taste comes alive. So onions and garlic have this extra power to them. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So that I've answered your question, Keith, about how you can do your cooked eggs, right? You can peel the eggs, sprinkle a little thing of salt, and you're good to go. Exactly. Or
Onions and garlic also give you bad breath.
You know, it's an interesting question, though. Oh, they give you bad breath. Maybe it's related. Maybe the bad breath is something to do with the evil spirits. Okay. Yeah, apparently the lice don't like it. Maybe the smell's got something to do with it. And one thing I want to say to you, though, is that I want to say to you this, that when it comes to, you know, you buy the garlic, the peeled garlic, you buy it in the store. They sell it like in a jar. Peeled garlic, maybe it's a problem. Unless it's got some oil on it or something, you know, it could be potentially a problem. Okay, what about a liquid that was left open overnight? If you had a liquid that was left open overnight, right? Maybe you made a sangria. You know, you can't drink too much sangria in one shot, right? And you left the sangria open. You left it on the Shabbos table, and the next morning you want to have sangria for breakfast, right? Right? Imagine, are you allowed to do that, right? So houses whose courtyards have snakes and scorpions nearby them, and they left drinks open for a period of time, even during the daytime, as long as they were unsupervised by a human being, you're not allowed to drink from drinks that were left open. Because of the danger that maybe the snake drank from it, or the scorpion drank from it and left some poison in it, which might be floating. Included in this prohibition, in this dangerous food, would be water, wine, milk, honey, and ground up garlic. Does ground up garlic form a juice? I don't think so, right? But it does. Garlic juice. You ever heard of garlic juice?
You can add some oil to it.
Oh yeah. Okay, garlic juice then. Okay. What's not included in the prohibition is pasteurized wine, which is not really considered wine at all. Even if it was left open, you've no problem with it, right? Which means the open sangria, as long as your sangria was made with pasteurized wine, you're okay, right? You know, I was showing my kids. Been coming from Africa. I like to take my kids to the Kruger National Park, which is the world's largest game reserve. And during the pandemic, I try to show them videos from South Africa, from the game reserve. So last night we showed them a video of a chalet in the Kruger National Park, where like a guest house, and the guest house had like a pool to it, and these two elephants came up, from the bush, and they started drinking from the pool. They put their noses out in, right, and they started drinking from the pool. Right, you never know what's going to drink from your exposed liquid, right? So, we've got all sorts of ducks that come into our pool. We recently changed that pool from chlorine to salt water. And apparently now we also found an interesting way to heat the pool. So we have these ducks that come into our pool. They love to hang out there. We have even a raccoon I saw there a few months ago. So yeah, you never know what's going to come out of your drinks. If you leave a drink open, like on the porch overnight by the pool, something exposed, you got to worry about it. And in Florida here, we got real concerns about snakes, and I don't know about scorpions here in Florida, but snakes. We got a turtle, like a huge turtle. Like I think it's a Florida. My kids tell me it's a Florida soft shell, I think they call it. It looks like a pig nose, but it's a real massive turtle. It comes out to the back of our house. You never know what kind of animals you're going to come across in this glorious state of Florida today. When most courtyards where people live, they're not really found snakes and scorpions unless you live in Florida, right? Then, according to the letter of the law, you really are allowed to drink these drinks that were left exposed. However, nevertheless, we should try to be cautious. You know what I mean? In the olden days, if all that you had in your home was a jar of milk, that was the only food you possessed, you'd have to be a little more frugal. But today, you know what I mean? We're a little more blessed with resources, so it's not really going to hopefully make a real big difference. What about drinks that were left overnight in the fridge or exposed, not sealed, right? Or in the cupboard, which was closed? They are considered, the fact that they were closed in the fridge or closed in the cupboard is considered like they were closed up, they were covered up, and therefore you are allowed to drink them. In Israel, they sell bags of milk, right? Sakit chalav, a bag of milk. And this bag of milk, you typically will put it into a plastic holder, and you snip off the top and you leave it open. You kind of leave it exposed. So you can't leave it on the table exposed. I don't think anybody would want to drink milk that was left on the table overnight, but in the fridge would not be a problem, right? Marty's asking a question. And so is Rob. You see on the screen, guys? Can you read the comments? Okay. So Rob wants to know, good morning, Rabbi, are there laws regarding cutting of the fingernails? A slight digression, but I will answer that. There are laws regarding the cutting of the fingernails. The first thing I hate to shock you with is that the Talmud tells us that someone who cuts his fingernails and his toenails on the same day will bury his sons and daughters. Don't get a manicure and pedicure on the same day. That's Kabbalistic out there, right? God forbid, don't do that, okay? Another thing about fingernails out there, Rob, is that if a person who cuts his fingernails and throws them on the floor is an evil person, because if a pregnant woman walks over them, she could have a miscarriage.
How could he be an evil person? A hidden good person.
He's a hidden good person. Or no, we have freedom of choice. We have freedom of choice. No evil comes from God, but evil comes from humans. Humans can be evil. Humans can be evil, but right. Okay, so you should. It says now this is very Kabbalistic stuff, Rob. Very, very Kabbalistic stuff. But it could be related, as you pointing out right now with your question, could be related to the Negel Vasser, to the nail water, right? That we're washing in the mornings, right? So you shouldn't throw your nails, because if a pregnant woman walks over them, she could potentially miscarry. A righteous person will bury his nails, and a chassid, says the Talmud, a pious person will burn his nails. Burn his nails. They smell to high heaven, if you burn them, by the way. But toilet would be the same as burying. Toilet would be the same as burying. Okay, so that is fingernails. By the way, when you cut your fingernails, another thing, you're not allowed to cut your fingernails in sequence. You're not allowed to cut your fingernails in sequence. You go like this. You start off on the ring finger of the left hand, and then you jump. You go ring finger of the left, and then the pointer of the left, then the pinky, then the middle finger, then the thumb. Right? So you're not doing anything in sequence. Then you go to the right hand, and you start with the pointer to the ring finger, to the thumb, middle, and pinky, right? And you did nothing in order. Okay, now Marty wants to know, where is this in the Torah? All the stuff that we're talking about is actually in the Talmud. It is in the Talmud and collected in the Code of Jewish Law. Let's see. It's in the Code of Jewish Law, basically. So it comes from the Talmud. It's not explicit in the Torah, but this would be what we call halacha l'Moshe Sinai, a law that was given directly to Moses on Mount Sinai from God, right? That's where it comes from. And as documented in the Talmud and codified in the Code of Jewish Law. Just interesting comment I see over here is that the kosher certification agencies, when they certify, like if they would certify, for example, the peeled garlic, or if they would certify the onion powder, what they'll do is that they'll make sure that the powder would have 4%, like oil or something else, or like pepper or like salt, just to make sure that way it's part of the kosher certification, to make sure that when you buy it with a kosher certification stamp, it's good. Okay, now let's talk about the dangers in drinking water. Keith just left over here. He walks around with like 3 gallons of water that he drinks all day, so this might be relevant to him. Let's see what's going on YouTube before we move on. Keith Kleining, it isn't very clear to throw your nails on the floor. It isn't very clean to throw your nails on the floor. Very good, Keith. I just mentioned your name. It's good to know you're with us. No, it's not very clean to throw your nails on the floor, and therefore a bad habit, and the Torah tells us do not do it, please. To Winston, to your question as to why sleep is 1/60th of death, 1/60th is a very important number when it comes to the laws of kosher. We've learned about that before. I'm not going to get into that right now. But you know what? Listen, it's a Kabbalistic thing about why sleep is 1/60th of death. I'm not exactly sure, but it's got to do with the fact that it's significant but not alarming. And the number 1/60th means significant but not alarming within the context of kosher, and therefore within the context of sleep, it's significant but not alarming. Now, Marty, so it's not written in the Torah. Let's go back. It's not in the written Torah, correct? It's not in the written Torah that is correct, but it is in the oral Torah, which is part of the written Torah. The written Torah is accompanied by the oral Torah, right? And therefore, just like the Constitution of the United States of America is a written constitution which has legal codes that explain the written law, same thing is with the oral Torah accompanying the written Torah. Good. So now let's move on to the dangers of drinking water. What does that involve? So there are those. Now this is a really weird one, man. This is really out there. There are those people, and this is just a custom, that pour a drop of water out of a cup before they drink from it. I mean, this is where like serious Jewish OCD comes from. Like before they drink water, they'll pour it on the floor. It's like there's always water on the floor. It's like, they'll pour a little bit of water out before they drink it. Why? Because when they do so, by pouring out a little bit of water, a tiny drop of water from the cup that you have had a drink from, you have ejected the evil spirit which may be resting on the water. I mean, this stuff is out there. Okay, you know what I mean? It's interesting, right? Someone who wants to drink water from rivers and streams can drink water from them when there is light outside and the water is inside of his both hands, where you can see clearly the clarity, the cleanliness of the water. But you shouldn't drink the water straight into your mouth. You shouldn't like drink it away where you can't see the water, or even with one hand. Similarly, you shouldn't drink with 2 hands if you can't see the water because it's nighttime, because we worry that you might drink some nasty creature in there, right? You could see some that you would have normally been able to see. Who knows what kind of snails, worms, eels, electric eels, God knows what other nonsense could be in the water that you're drinking from a stream. I mean, that could be dangerous. A leech or something, that could be really dangerous, right?
You said evil spirit again.
No.
Back up, you said evil spirit. That kind of confuses me what we almost agreed with.
I'm moving backwards.
Where did evil spirit come from?
Right. An evil spirit is a hidden good spirit.
You can generically say that for everything.
That's right. That's right. What?
What about the bacteria that you can't really see?
That's right. Oh, so bacteria. It's an interesting question by Edna right now. He says, what bacteria that you can't really see? For example, I come from Africa. And in Africa, it's known that you should never swim or drink waters from an eddy. You know what an eddy is? Well, your name is Eddie. An eddy is a part of a lake or a river or a stream that's not moving. It's still. Because that's where the Bilharzia bacteria sits.
Same here.
What? Well, I guess so, right? So I had a cousin. She once walked. She walked from Israel to South Africa. She hiked. I mean, she was a real adventurous spirit. And by the time she got to South Africa, she was ill with bilharzia. I remember because she swam in Lake Malawi and she drank from, I guess, the water that she shouldn't drink from. So that was probably invisible. But I guess also when you can see the water, it's got like weird white stuff on it, like moss and stuff growing on it. You know that's not the water you want to be drinking from. When it's easy, free flowing, you can safely assume that it's probably okay. Now, for this reason, somebody who wants to drink water from a pipe or a tap or something should be careful that he shouldn't drink it straight out of the pipe. Like you don't put the pipe in your mouth or like a faucet straight into your mouth. Rather, you should make sure you close it with your hands and then you drink it, right? But yeah, that interesting custom of pouring out the water before you drink it, really out there. Let's see. That comes from the Code of Jewish Law. And the language of the code, it says like this. Because there is, I'm quoting now, because there is dangerous waters from which demons have drank from. Demons. And this is their healing. Right? Now, why is this only a custom? Because you don't necessarily, so many people have like, don't do this. So many people don't do this that it's been like downgraded to a custom. We calling it a custom. See, if you notice anybody like before they drink, they keep on spilling the water. It's not because they're there's something wrong with them, but because they're adhering to this nuance of Code of Jewish Law. Again, it's not a law. It's more of a custom at this point. Now, what about food that was under your bed? If you left food or drink under your bed, and you slept on that bed at night, you should not eat it, even if it was inside of a box of metal, because of the evil spirit that rests upon them. Okay? After the fact, ex post facto, if you already ate it, and also if it's like something very valuable, right? Like some very expensive something, right? Then it's okay to have eaten it. This law is only if the food or the drink was resting on the ground underneath the bed. But if they were not on the ground, for example, at the bottom of a ship or underneath an airplane, right? It's underneath the airplane. It's underneath your bed, but it's not on the ground, right? Or if it was underneath the baby stroller. So the baby stroller is sleeping and the food is underneath the baby stroller, but it's not really on the ground, right? Or if the food maybe was underneath the pillow. I don't know, maybe you hid some chocolate from your kids or something, right? And you put it underneath your pillow. In the morning you wake up or whatever, you wake up, you want to eat it, but then you realize that it's been under you when you were sleeping, right? So it was under the bed. So it was under you, but it was not on the floor, right? In this case, it's not a problem. We don't worry about the evil spirit, okay? What about food and drink that was left in the bathroom? Food and drink that was left exposed inside of the bathroom, you should not eat it.
Should food and drink be in the bathroom?
It shouldn't be, but if it was, we're talking about if it was, right? By the way, when I was in Mexico a while ago, I went to some people's house. It was interesting to see the way people live there. Some people, and they live like in one house, one room. The whole house is one room, and there's like a curtain separating the shower from the kitchen, and the bathroom is practically inside the living room, which is all part of the bedroom. It's like one. I remember in Japan, people lived like that, and it could be that there's a division, a mechitza if you have a proper mechitza, but if the mechitza is open, if the little shower curtain separating the bathroom from the rest of the room is open, then the whole house is a bathroom. right? So what happens now? You shouldn't eat food that was left exposed in the bathroom. But if they were wrapped up, then it's okay if you need to. Nevertheless, you should be careful not to bring food in the first place into the bathroom. Medicines that were brought into the bathroom, and we typically store some medicines in the bathroom, right? Including tablets and other stuff that have no taste, there's no problem with swallowing them. Now, it's interesting. Some of the commentaries say that if you left food in the bathroom, even ex post facto, you shouldn't eat it because it's actually quite dangerous. But there are those that allow it. I guess it would depend on if it was exposed or not. Okay? Last piece for today on our interesting that's last piece over here, which is food and drink that cause you to forget. Food and drink that's bad for your memory. Right? Let's check this out. Person should be careful from eating and drinking foods that cause you to forget, could cause you to lose your memory, because our sages already have told us that anyone who forgets anything that he has learned, any Torah that he's learned, it's considered as if he is liable for his own life. He's responsible for his own life. In other words, God will hold him accountable for having forgotten that which he's learned in Torah, because it says in the Torah, be very cautious, be exceedingly cautious, and to guard yourself very much in case you forget the words that your eyes have seen, right? What does it mean to forget? How do you forget something actively? Obviously, one way is by not reviewing your studies. You're supposed to review your studies. You have to. But but there's another way that you can actively cause yourself to forget, and that is through one of the following 7 ways. Number 1, if you eat olives without having the olive oil poured in them prior. Olive oils that have not had eating olives without having olive oil poured in them beforehand. I warned you about this session here today. I told you this one's going to be a little bit out there, right? It says in the Talmud that olive oil is very good for memory retention. And how much olive oil needs to be poured in your olive oil, need to be soaked in olive oil before you eat it. It doesn't have to be that way. Rather, the fact that you poured in a drop of olive oil into a box of olives, that's already removes the spirit of forgetfulness. Interesting way. There's another thing you'll notice in a yeshiva. Whenever you see a yeshiva student away from his desk and he has a book, you'll notice that the book is either closed or it's covered. Because it says elsewhere in the Talmud that there's an angel in charge of forgetfulness. The angel in charge of forgetfulness, and this angel, when you walk away from your studies, from your book, and you leave it open, he comes in and makes you forget it. Interesting, right? Kabbalistic. You and the angel, you know each other. Do you remember his name? Forgot? All right, God forbid. God forbid. All right. You should never know. So that's one way. One way of forgetfulness, of initiating forgetfulness, is by eating olives without having a drop of olive oil poured upon them, right? So, right. So I guess they need to be sprinkled. You need to like squeeze a little, take a little squish, pour a little olive oil out, and everything's good, right? But when you buy the olives in a jar, it's fine, right? I imagine if you go to an olive tree, and in Israel there's tons of them, you go to an olive tree and you eat it off the tree, that would be the problem. Because you're eating it straight at the tree. Rather take one olive, squish, right? A little olive oil, right? Number 2, if you eat the heart of a animal or a bird, like a cow, obviously kosher animals, cow, goat, eating a heart. Says that the Gemara, the Gemara says this. Interesting, right? Have you ever eaten a heart? Who eats a heart?
Don't tell me that Mu'rav Yerushalmi is not kosher.
What? Mu'rav, what is that?
Yerushalmi.
What is that?
Lungs, brains, heart, so.
Oh, it's a mixture? Yeah, you shouldn't eat the heart, it says. Elaine says, it seems like we are constantly surrounded by evil spirits. Is it only at night? Well, yeah, I want to tell you, by the way, we are constantly surrounded by evil spirits. This is true, Elaine. We're moving a little into the Kabbalistic realm right now. But there are lots of evil spirits around us, and it is our Torah and mitzvahs that protect us. Absolutely. You know, the Talmud says elsewhere that when you feel, I think we learned this in Yaakov, in the Talmud studies a few months ago, that when you're in a crowd and you feel pressed, those are the demons that are pushing you. right? There's different ways of seeing a demon, and yeah, they're all around us. Thankfully, the Baal Shem Tov banished them to not be visible to people. But there are absolutely this idea of haunted houses. There's absolutely such a thing. But the one thing I want to tell you is that all these evil spirits cannot tolerate the light which is generated through Torah study and mitzvahs. When you put up a mezuzah, you're banishing the evil spirits. When you do a mitzvah, when you surround yourselves with mitzvahs, not just because you're doing God a favor by doing these mitzvahs, you're actually doing yourself a favor because you're removing the spirits of impurity from around you. The third of 7 items that cause forgetfulness is someone who eats from a food that has been eaten by a mouse or a cat. So if a mouse or a cat ate out of something and you eat it for whatever reason, causes forgetfulness. Someone who drinks some water that he has bathed in. If you drink from water that you bathed in. So for example, when we wash Negel Vasser in the morning, that water you're not supposed to drink. You're not supposed to drink that water. You should do nothing with it. It's actually got an evil spirit upon it. Yeah. Oh, they drink their own. Ouch.
The recycle it, but how does that?
So in the International Space Station, says Warren, our senior counsel here, he says that over there they recycle their urine. Man, I don't know. I imagine that they do enough recycling to the point that it doesn't look like urine anymore, right? Or their shower water. It's processed. Yeah, it's processed. A chemical, yeah, it's not the same water anymore. Marty, what's the word? He's validating my point that we did indeed learn last year about the demons being all around us. Yeah, they are there, guys. And you have to protect yourself. There's no jokes. Bad things happen, right? And life is a dangerous place. Nobody comes out of here alive, right? But how long you can survive has got to do with how long you protect yourself, how much protective gear you surround yourself with. It's a dangerous place. And it's not only at night, by the way. The Talmud goes into detail about not being. We learned in the Talmud in Brachos, what Marty's pointing out. You're not supposed to pray in a haunted house. You're not. Sorry, not a haunted house. In a empty, like a chuvah. How do you translate chuvah?
A destroyed.
Like a dilapidated house. You're not supposed to even walk into a dilapidated house the whole time. There's a whole discussion in the Talmud because there's spirits in there. Right? It's not only by day, it's not only by night, it's also by day. It depends where. And there's a whole discussion in the Talmud. If there's 2 people, can the evil spirits come? Or if there's only 1 person, does the evil spirit come? Generally speaking, surround yourself with Torah and mitzvahs. Wear a pair of tzitzis. Wear a yarmulke. Have a mezuzah on your door. Late to fill and give tzedakah. Learn Torah. You're good. Number 5, someone who eats bread that wasn't fully baked. Right? Number 6, someone who eats meat out of the spoon with which you stir the pot. So you want to taste some soup, that's okay. But if you eat the meat out of the spoon that stirred the pot, causes forgetfulness. And finally, somebody who drinks water that are flowing in a cemetery. Don't drink water that's flowing in a cemetery. All right? With this, folks, we'll end our very, very interesting Torah study this morning. Thank you for joining me here today. Today is Thursday, and Corey is giving a class at 11:30 to men and women on Hebrew language through the Siddur prayer book. It's on Zoom at 11:30, jewishgardens.com/Zoom. Next week, God willing, we will continue with the laws of insects. Very, very, very interesting and very interesting laws about the laws of insects and how we protect ourselves from insects. Okay, and how we make sure we don't eat insects. Because by the way, you think that eating, you go to Publix and you buy fruits and vegetables, you're good. It's really not that simple. The most complicated kosher foods are fruits and vegetables because you got to check them from all the insects, and we'll be talking a lot about that. Especially the strawberry, absolutely. All right, guys, thank you very much for joining me this morning. It's a pleasure. Have a wonderful day. Keep on studying Torah and keep away from those evil spirits, guys. No forgetfulness. From strength to strength. Interesting stuff we learned today, huh?